Hello and welcome, everybody. We're just going to give this a few seconds as people come in. Thank you for joining another Fishside webinar. There's three of us today. There's me, I'm Moritz, the Managing Director of the Fishside. There's Johannes, who is the Chief Farm and Finance Officer of Organic Garden. And of course, there's, last but not least, Tanya Hall, the Managing Director of Hatch Innovation Services. I'll be introducing them a little bit more just a little bit later. Let's give this a few more seconds as more participants join us. There's 30 of you already. We're really excited about this conversation. This should be very good. I know people on webinars always say this. They always say, I'm so excited about this conversation. Today, it's very, very true. Right, 35. 35 sounds like a great number to start on. Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm Moritz Müller, as I just said, the Managing Director of the Fishside. I've been really looking forward to this today. A few organizational things up ahead. This is an open conversation, so there'll be no slides, there'll be no talking pieces. We'll take questions as they come in sometimes, but we do have a Q&A at the end. We also have a fact sheet you can download. I'll drop two links in the chat in a moment. One of them is a deck about Organic Garden, lots of information about their project. The other thing is a fact sheet where you can specifically learn about their RAS project, where you can get in touch with Johannes here directly. You can book calls with him. Now, we'll be talking for about 40 minutes straight. Might take a question here or there if it's very, very relevant to what we're talking about right now. We might not, but we'll definitely take your questions in the Q&A. So if you scroll down to the toolbar on the bottom, you'll see there's a Q&A function. You can use this Q&A function to enter your questions. You just have to give us your name. And you can vote other people's questions. So remember, put in your question early, because other people will be able to vote up your question as the webinar continues. We'll allow for a little bit of a voting period. So also questions that come in late on topics we address a bit later in the talking piece can still be voted up. But generally, if you have a question from the beginning, drop it in there. Okay, great. Well, we're here today because food is at the heart of everything we do, and probably the thing we enjoy most in life. However, we know that our current food system is responsible for nearly a third of total greenhouse gas emissions. And it's one of the main drivers of soil and biodiversity loss. It consumes a huge amount of large natural resources, and the food system is largely not economically viable anymore without very large government subsidies. In the midst of this, we're experiencing an unprecedented rate of change in our technological world. Our scientific knowledge grows exponentially in many different fields, and it's opening up right now avenues of implementing systems that would have been very difficult to do 100 years ago. So we have two kind of diametrically opposed developments, and we're here today to discuss how we can bring this together. Our governments are working actively, or at least they say they're working actively on the decarbonization of our planet. The so-called, for instance, the farm to fork strategy by the EU is at the heart of the European Green Deal. It achieves to create environmentally friendly and resilient food systems that allow us to sever our dependencies on globalized supply chains and the impacts of dependencies they bring, as seen, for instance, during the COVID pandemic. We all remember what it was like to be in the supermarket during that time. So right now in Europe, on a policy level, on a technological level, we've never had a better time to talk about building a brand new technology platform for food. I'm here today with two people who are working hard on helping us implement this. There's obviously Tanya Hall, Director of Hatch Innovation Services, marine biologist, aquaculture technology and innovation expert, as well as Johannes Blei, who's the Managing Director, Chief Farm and Finance Officer of Organic Garden, and he is hell-bent on reducing CO2 in our food systems. Welcome to you too. Okay, to jump straight into this, Johannes, what is Organic Garden? What is your history, and how did you become part of this?
Moritz, thank you so much for actually organizing all of this. It's just great to have you and Tanya today here in the webinar, and I guess around 150 to 200 experts and interested stakeholders in the fish business of the future. So my background, I come from basically a high-tech world. For instance, I was working for Airbus corporate, more in the finance world, and I was really drawn into the sustainability business, and I was checking so many aspiring young companies to actually join, and I was very happy to actually had the chance to join Organic Garden about 2 years ago, and I'm one of 3 managing directors. The company actually was founded about a year before, and my focus actually is on the farms themselves. But before we rush into the farms of Organic Garden, why don't I give you a brief outline what really is the Organic Garden world? I think this is key to understand for the listeners, to have basically the framework, how everything pictures in. So Organic Garden, if I make it short, it's based on 3 pillars, right? So the first pillar is taste. We are a nutritional company. We stand for dishes. We stand for good food. Everything has to be at an extremely high quality, and the taste is, I would say, the key determining factor if somebody who eats an Organic Garden dish becomes a regular customer or not. So the taste is like the crucial principle of number 1. If it doesn't taste good for the customer, we don't give it out to the customer. Second, it's not only about taste, it's really about, is the food that you eat good for your body? So we look really into the nutritional values with a huge team of food scientists, about physicians, about experimental cooks to know exactly what kind of pepper to combine with what kind of oil and what kind of fish, that really your body can absorb all these nutritions. So it has to be good for your body. And this is actually something that we see more and more in the heart and in the focus of our core customers who look for these kind of, I would say, functional deliverance of food. And thirdly, and this is becoming, I would say, a purchasing argument from more and more customers nowadays, is what we purchase good for the planet? And the people become more and more reflective about what they eat. Is it not only good for my body, but is it also sustainable for the planet? So taste, good for your body, good for the planet. Those are the 3 pillars of Organic Garden. And for those of you who are basically into this nutritional diet topic, this is also called the so-called Eat Lancet study. It's basically a worldwide renowned study of how the human being should eat food in a way to live long and healthy, and at the same time in a way that our planet can sustain such a diet up to feeding 10 billion people. And our farm does play a certain role in all of this, but I guess we touch this later.
Yeah. You had a perfect bridge there, because obviously Organic Garden at this moment is mainly a catering supplier, right? You're serving, I think, up to 7,000 meals per day. It's a very impressive business already, but we're talking about something else today. So what we're seeing here in your background, the new farm, how does this fit into the mission? How do you tackle the status quo of the food system with your farm?
Yeah, perfect. So when I said what are the 3 pillars of Organic Garden, so this is basically reflected in our nutritional diet. And when we talk about the final consumer, where is this final consumer we're addressing? We see him primarily in the canteen. Don't worry, I come back to your question, but I think it's important for the audience that we are focusing first on the customer. And the customer in Germany is primarily the one that we face in the canteen business. So just to give you like a ballpark figure, you have daily 17 million. So it's 17 million daily dishes served in canteens in Germany, which includes kindergarten, schools, university, care facilities, and of course, especially company canteens. And out of these 17 million, we say from the total market, the addressable market for us are 5 million. Those are those guys who actually say taste is important for us. What's good for my body is important to us. What's good for the planet is important to us. So 5 million addressable. And again, the garden aims to have a serving of 10% of these customers in 2030. So 500,000 dishes served daily in German canteens based on our recipes, for which we do provide into the canteens the food. And the food comes from farmers. Currently, we source from regional farmers, not from an Organic Garden farm, because this is still basically coming up in the next couple of years. So we source 100% from regional farmers around the canteens. And in the future, we source about 40% of what is served in the canteens from these farms. So in the background, this is what I have here behind me, is basically the one and only slide I have. There's nothing more. It's a 1-slide presentation. And the core element is you have basically renewable energy production. I think maybe the topic of energy we can discuss a bit later. And the core 3, I would say, food supplying modules are the vegetable greenhouses we can see here, where you have usually pepper, salad, cucumber, things like this. Then you have the mushroom facility operated by mushroom experts. And finally, what brings us together today is the most crucial element, which is the fish farm, which you can see here.
Perfect. Thanks for that introduction. This is where I want to pick up with you, Tanya. I know you're at the edge of your seat to talk about this. You were introduced to this concept last week at the Ocean Innovation Conference in Den Haag. You were very excited about this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. this farm a RAS system together? What do you think?
Well, thank you so much, Moritz, and thank you for inviting me to this panel discussion. And yes, it was definitely it's a very new kind of a concept, I think, that Organic Garden is now presenting. It's actually the first time that we actually see both the green and the blue food value chain being connected with each other in terms of a circular kind of a process. And I think that's really something new. Is a quite kind of an innovative way in terms of rethinking in terms of how food production can be produced in a very kind of a new sustainable kind of a way. What I think is quite important to remember is that seafood is also, as Johannes mentioned, a critical part in terms of a healthy kind of a diet. I think that seafood needs to be part of it, but at the same time, we also need to find new ways in terms of how can we actually produce seafood in a more sustainable kind of a way. And so far, we definitely have seen that the way that we are farming seafood in terms of aquaculture is still very much limited in terms of the environmental constraints, right? The environmental factors in terms of which species can be farmed in which kinds of geographical locations, or the environmental limitations in terms of the sustainability limitations of that ocean system or that fjord system supporting that kind of biological production. I think that we definitely need to see alternative ways in terms of how we can produce food more locally, in terms of more locally close to kind of markets. At the moment, we definitely are seeing that a lot of where we are producing maybe farmed seafood is in one geographical location because of its environmental support to farm that kind of a species, but it's being consumed in a very different geographical location, which is putting a lot of stress in terms of the transportation, the carbon emission, in terms of moving the different seafood products across different kinds of continents. So I think the fact now that Organic Garden is trying to see how they can address in terms of how can we actually produce both healthy, nutritious, and also low carbon kind of a seafood product closer to the market will have a huge benefit in terms of reducing the carbon emission in terms of the transportation of these kinds of food products.
Totally, Tanya, and if I may add just the fact, I think it's always comes so surprising to people, the average item that the German eats, the average, has a transportation path of around 3,500 kilometers behind itself, which you quite often don't see because, you know, it's just kind of hidden in kind of final dishes, but this is the fact, 3,500 kilometers per average item that you need. Just a crazy number. And with our focus on having a regional production from the farm, plus from the regional co-producers, we always try to have the farm with a radius of 150 kilometers, where we have basically the urban areas. We usually look at urban areas where we have in total around 3 to 5 million people living in cities in such a hub. And in these cities, we go to the canteen business, and out of the farm, we produce what you can see in the background. We combine it with meat, dairy products, eggs, field fruits like potatoes and grains. And this we process it in this region and we sell it in the region. So it's exactly what you're actually putting here on the table, that what needs to be done. Yes, we have to reduce by far these global sourcing paths.
Definitely, just to add in terms of that, what Johannes is mentioning, I think that looking in terms of the sustainability, in terms of the seafood value chain, there is two really important areas in terms of that the industry needs to continue to work on in terms of taking down the carbon footprint. Transportation is definitely one of them. That's the biggest impact in terms of the carbon emission coming out of the aquaculture and the seafood value chain. And the second input factor is also in terms of the feed, how we actually are feeding our fish. So I think that it is the need in terms of rethinking, in terms of how we are producing, and also in terms of where we are producing it, but also in terms of what are we also feeding our animals, and what are alternative kind of feed solutions, feed ingredients can be contributed from such a circular kind of a concept moving forward.
Yeah.
Very much so, yeah. And we know in the industry now this, not everybody might know this, right? Tanya and I come from the aquaculture side of things. I know there are many today here that do not come from that side of things. So there is a lot of work going on in the direction of ocean independent feeds, which is great news, because feeding fish in aquaculture systems, be it land-based, be it ocean-based, if the feed itself is coming from the ocean, we're really not changing anything. I see, Alex, you raised a hand there. Let me just see if I can bring you in there. Alex, do you hear me? This is Alex Marsh from Cargo. They just gave you the permission to... There you are. Hi, Alex. Ask away.
Yeah, no. Hi, so I was interested to understand the name of the company is Organic Harvest. Is the intention for everything in the system to be farmed to organic principles, or is it a different meaning of the word organic? Because in Germany it's bio.
Yeah, Alex, great question. By the way, the company's name is called Organic Garden. This is why we have this symbol here. So it's an organic garden, and the garden is basically because we see the farm basically as a garden where everything is grown in the garden. Organic actually means that things are coming more in a way organically together. So it's not basically having 100% bio. We strive to have as much bio or organic labeling content as possible. So for instance, within the mushroom world, it's quite easy. So the mushroom will be 100% bio or organic. For the fish, if you're familiar with the fish farms, well, as soon as you have basically a roof over the fish, if you have a closed fish system, you won't get a certificate to have like a Bio-Siegel in Germany for this. But we do know that the certification authorities are reflective about this, and they're trying to change also how they give accreditations to have even a closed circuit system being a Bio-Siegel. For the being good for the planet, we try to have as much bio-organic content as possible. At the moment, for instance, we have some schools where we cater, we currently serve up to 7,000 daily dishes. And in the school business, we have some schools that are very insistent about having 100% bio, and there we do already manage with our partner farmers from the region to deliver up to this promise. And on average, I think we are aiming to go around 50 to 70% final bio content on the dishes that we give out to the customers.
Super, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Moritz actually mentioned this point about the feed of the fish also is like the focus topic. And when I joined Organic Garden, for me, it was just so surprising that a lot of the fish feed that is fed, for instance, to the salmons in the Norwegian fjords, stems, it originates from the western coast of Africa or from the coast of Chile. Then it's processed, it's flown all the way or shipped out all the way to Norway, fed to the fish is processed in Poland and then eaten in Germany. And this is just so crazy, so super crazy. So this is also one of the driving factors why at the farm, as you can see here, we have the insect breeding element. So basically the animal proteins needed for some kind of fish is also being produced directly on the farm. And one thing that we haven't covered yet, so I just jump ahead, maybe it was on the list, is that this farm reflects basically a circuit. It's like a synergetic cycle where we try to reuse as much the nutrients from one module for the other. Dipping into this would be now too lengthy, but to give two examples, because I think they're just the biggest ones. So if you take the fish wastewater, and usually if you go to the green field and you have a fish module, a factory in Germany, then and you put it basically into the official or into the public sewage system, you have to pay per cubic meter. This cost is basically eliminated because we take the wastewater. We have a good filtering German supplier who can filter the wastewater to exactly the quality that is needed in the greenhouses without changing the flavor of what is produced in the greenhouses. And so the greenhouse guy, especially now in times of drought, of dry and crazy erratic weather, he on average in Germany has to purchase more and more fresh water. So he saves himself some cost and the fish farmer saves himself some cost. And there are like numerous of these examples where we have synergies that just treat the raw resources in a more efficient way. And if you combine all of these synergies, the production costs are really slashed for everybody who is part of this organic garden farm and open for using and exploiting these synergies.
I would love to maybe just follow up in terms, as you highlighted, Johannes, in terms of what are sustainable ways in terms of being able to feed our farms in the future, and especially in terms of the right nutritious kind of feeds in terms of aquaculture species as well. I think definitely the industry has come a long way. I think it's also important to acknowledge that aquaculture has been on a tremendous kind of a growth journey. It has grown to be quite of a niche kind of a protein production to be now a very kind of a mature industry. And of course, supporting that kind of a mature industry also requires in terms of finding the right type of ingredients that has the nutritional profile that can be suitable in terms of farming the fish, at the same time also making sure that it actually is a healthy seafood product to be consumed by consumers as well.
Yes.
I think the great thing about the aquaculture industry today is definitely that they are only and depending on in terms of sustainable feed ingredient sources. And I think this is maybe also where organic garden has the opportunity to differentiate itself, because it's a smaller kind of a scale, it's a circular kind of a concept. And I think this is what makes organic garden very unique, with the opportunity to use these input factors also in terms of farming different kinds of protein sources. But at the same time, being mindful, making sure that in terms of keeping the balance in terms of the aquaculture industry also being very large, commercial at scale, and also finding the right kind of ingredient solutions is something that also requires big volumes to support that kind of a commercial industry moving forward.
Yeah, good point, Tanya. We're already halfway through our talking bit, so let me refocus us just a little bit here. We want to talk about RAS today. So naturally, Johannes, you talked about your farm now. It all sounds almost too good to be true. So we are aware there are some downsides to RAS. Like there's a substantial energy consumption that renders most projects non-profitable. There's a certain capital expenditure to be calculated. There's a certain water expenditure to be calculated. What's the plan of Organic Garden to address these points? And Tanya, feel free to jump in wherever you see fit.
Yeah, let me try to pick up with, I think, the first remark about the energy. As you can see, we have a carbon dioxide neutral production, which is usually based on geothermal energy. So about half.
Sorry, say that one more time. Your entire farm is
geothermal energy production, which is CO2 neutrally producing the electricity and the warmth of this farm. About half of the 10 sites in Germany we're planning to develop, they have ample supply of geothermal energy. At the other sites, we use biomass or biogas existing facilities. They're just looking for consumers like us to basically connect their green energy supply. And usually we use the so-called process heat or low temperature heat, which is quite often available at very affordable conditions, because it can't be shipped from a biomass power plant to the next city. So there's basically on average per site on market values, 1 million euros going to the air of energy unused. So basically we can purchase this kind of energy extremely low. At the same time, we always add basically our own solar panels on the roofs. So because all of these elements, basically they come in greenhouses. We have a lot of floor space to be used and utilized, which is on average about 80,000 square meters suitable for solar panels. And if you produce in Germany your own electricity and you use it directly at the site, you more or less, this is just really a simplification, you have only half of the electricity cost. So based on this, I would say energy system with predictable and I would say fairly affordable energy cost. Just in Bavaria, where we start the first farm, we had been offered 40 sites to develop organic garden farms, because we take existing regional partner farmers with us. We supply in the regions, the kindergärten, the schools, universities, care facilities, and canteens. So this is why the city mayors or the district councils, they ask us, please come with an organic garden site. And we get offered so many different sites that we have the opportunity to, I would say, acquire land at fairly affordable conditions. Plus, we are very swift in obtaining the construction permits. And this usually is quite a cost factor. So whoever who is partnering with us on these farms, we have affordable energy prices at predictable cost for the next years. We can basically offer a share of the territory with permits at very affordable prices. And because we use all these existing models, we're not developing any technology, we just bring them all together. We call it a food platform, basically, that we offer. If you just take the established synergies there, you reduce your operating cost as well. Plus, since we have the offtake from Organic Garden and we can ship directly to the canteens, we know exactly what kind of component is ready to be eaten in the farms. And then we can just shift and change the Organic Garden recipes in the canteens. Just imagine basically there's a big digital button for Germany and you press it and all of a sudden 500,000 daily dishes they are basically reflecting more the ready tomatoes or the ready mushrooms or the ready trout, pike, perch, and salmon. So there's basically zero waste. Zero waste is good for the planet, but also good for the calculation of a profit and loss statement. So all of these factors basically reduce the cost for the parties joining us for this content.
If I may also follow up in terms of the energy, I think, I mean, for those who have seen these kind of land-based systems, farming seafood, I mean, it's really is impressive in terms of how technologically advanced they are, right? I mean, these are highly complex systems. And I think that we definitely have seen a lot of technology developments from these land-based technologies coming in and being more like a novel farming technology solution. Is now actually been a lot of technology developments also making these systems much more energy efficient. So I think that we are seeing now also both recirculated aquaculture system providers providing these complex technology systems that also are setting up different kinds of technology platforms to see how they can actually make these kinds of onshore land-based farming systems as energy effective as possible. So I think that we definitely are seeing now a huge kind of technology development that definitely also will benefit in terms of that transition in terms of kind of a low kind of a carbon source. But definitely based calculations that we have done in terms of evaluating and assessing the carbon footprint of different kinds of land-based technology systems, as long as you have a renewable energy source, which is also the basis for organic garden, you almost have like a zero carbon emission coming out of this system. So I think the critical part is definitely in terms of the energy source, but secondly, also there are technologies and systems of development that we are seeing with this land-based system that definitely is also now improving in terms of its energy efficiency.
Exciting. Now, talking about energy efficiency is one thing. Let's talk about water efficiency. Water is becoming more and more of a scarce resource. Johannes, I know you have very strong wishes for water consumption of this system. What do you see the system like? And Tanya, feel free to pick that up with some reality checks of what's possible right now.
So far, based on our experience in the last years, this is absolutely right, Mo. It's one of the most crucial prerequisites to set up a fish farm in Germany. Luckily, because we got offered so many sites, one of the very first things we check how much water is available at the site and is it a reliable source? And is the water quality actually good enough for the different types of fish suitable for growing? Based on the system, we are not actually telling anybody you have to use the system. So I would say we are technology agnostic. So we are open to different types of technology, to principles that we always try to clarify upfront is it a proven technology? So we don't want to risk more or less a technology demonstrator risk. So it should be a proven technology, preferably observable in another system somewhere. It's a reference system. And secondly, we try to have as high water efficiency as possible. So we do know that there's some hybrid RAS systems that have water exchange rates of 10 to 20% that could be suitable for some of the sites. Some other of our sites, they do require maximum 10% water exchange of the whole system, rather going down to 5%. We do know that there are some technology developers that are even going down to 2 or 3% water exchange rate. So we're quite keen on getting into discussion with these kind of suppliers. But in general, we are not focused on this is a system you have to use. The fish farm operator, so hopefully one of the guys actually joining us today who is listening to this and who is thrilled about this great business opportunity for the German fish market, has a fish system in his mind that he would like to operate. And we're very open to discuss this with him.
I think that's a very good point, Johannes. I think we're definitely seeing also a degree of, in terms of diversification, in terms of the different technologies now being used in these land-based systems. You have both in terms of the flow-through systems, as you mentioned, and where you have 100% of the water being exchanged, to these more hybrid systems that are having a higher degree of water exchange, but still recirculating percentage of the water. And what we definitely have now seen recently in terms of a really emerging technology sector with this recirculated aquaculture system that actually have the capacity to recycle almost up to 99 and even almost 99.5% of all the freshwater or the water being used in these kinds of systems. So these are highly recirculated based kind of system with exactly the purpose, as you mentioned, Johannes, to see how you can take down the water consumption to a minimum and to recycle it. I think also one of the benefits that we have seen in terms of these closed system is also the opportunity, not only in terms of recycling the water, but also in terms of collecting all types of waste products coming out of it. You have the opportunity to treat 100% treat, but we also are seeing a high degree of the wastewater, which is also high in terms of different kinds of organic material and nutrients, is now actually being reused in terms of other types of food productions. And I think this also fits well in terms of the Organic Gardens food technology platform, in terms of seeing how one can reuse the sludge, the water coming out from the fish production system, and using that as a nutrient streams in terms of other kinds of protein production systems.
Yeah. Now I'll move us on here a little bit because we've got 10 minutes left in our talking part. We still have a few points to get through. One of the most important points, building something like this, is of course communal buy-in, right? We want a great market. I think Johannes will talk about in a minute how great Germany is a market for fish and why a RAS system is very attractive in this. But there's also the question of political buy-in at communal level. What about infrastructure providers and water treatment plants?
So I think I touched briefly on the point that this organic garden system, including the regional farmers, producing in the region, processing in the region, and supplying to the B2B consumers, honestly, is a political winner topic. So we receive, I would say, with this kind of approach, you do receive basically the political will to strongly support us. And a lot of infrastructure in the German rural communal areas is under the directive of the politicians. So if you have the different layers of the politicians behind this concept, and without the political will to receive an organic garden system at a given site, we actually wouldn't go there. So if we check on the different steps in the political hierarchy, if we get the full support from the local one up to the state district, and then basically it's quite easy to also get the support of the water authorities, of the construction authorities. For the infrastructure, if you look basically into, if you talk about infrastructure in terms of how is the territory, as we have so many sites being offered, we quite easily filter out those where you don't have the right water, where the land itself is cut in a weird way, where you'd have to do a lot of, I would say, rebuilding the territory itself. So we basically look for the fillet pieces of real estate, more or less ready to put the plants on. To find a construction company, if you talk about infrastructure, it's quite easy. We have a lot of construction companies to say, this is fantastic, that's good for their sustainable part of their real estate construction business. And they love the fact that we're not saying this is a single farm for Bavaria, but that we are outlining a plan to scale this out and roll it out for 10 farms in Germany. And we are totally convinced, together with our partners, as soon as the first organic garden farm, High-Tech Farm 4.0, is producing a CO2 reduced regional high quality food in a system, that this first farm is the blueprint to scale it out to other European countries. And then the market is just crazy how big it could be.
That might very well be. Wastewater, talking about infrastructure, do you have buy-in on the wastewater level?
Wastewater, it always depends on the local sewage system. Actually, there are some sites that are happy to have a constant water stream, because just honestly, it sounds silly, but it cleans the pipes with a constant flow through, and actually the contamination level of what comes out from the fish compared to, I would say, what you have on the typical households is fairly low. So just a good constant flowing through of the pipe and of the sewage system. However, there are some sites, to be open, there where the existing sewage system is decades old, and they quite often couldn't handle this kind of volume. What we do then in these kind of cases, we need about 5,000 square meters. One of these farms is about 200,000 square meters. So 5,000 square meters is just a small fraction, easy to put in as an additional module, which would be a wastewater treatment plant. And then in the end, you put the residual fish wastewater in, and what you get out is basically on a quality comparatively as rainwater. And that's usually in German, by German water regulations, allowed to be put basically back into the ground, or back into basically channels, or into rivers, if you ensure that you have this rainwater quality. And there we do partner with some very renowned and very well experienced wastewater treatment companies.
I think that's really important point to highlight, Johannes, because everything is being produced in a closed kind of a system. You also have the opportunity to 100% treat the water as well, right? So, and that is definitely what we're seeing with all these kinds of land-based production facilities. 100% of the water is being treated. So you're being treated in terms of both taking down the phosphorus, the nitrogen, the organic solid levels, and so on. So 100% of the water can be treated. But I think it's also an important point is that a lot of this water is actually very rich when it comes to nutrients again. So we definitely are seeing now also in large scale. I'm based here in Norway, in the home of the salmon farming industry, and a lot of onshore land-based production going on at the moment in terms of salmon, and especially for the juvenile stages of salmon, but also in terms of full harvest stage of salmon. And we are now definitely seeing specialized kinds of companies. We're seeing more and more players that actually are now collecting the sludge from these highly advanced fish processing facilities, because it has a nutritional kind of a value that can be reused.
Tanya, if I can pick up quickly on this, I love this because we spoke about it last week in Den Haag, Netherlands, at the Ocean Innovation, to also even go deeper in exploiting the values of the sludge that's in the wastewater. So I'm totally happy if anybody in this audience comes also from this business segment, to have a wastewater exploiting what's inside of the wastewater, even for more of the modules. But to get basically to one point, which I think I skipped over a bit quicker, looking at the fish, Moritz, but there's a similarity. We not only look at the around 50% of the fish that is the fillet, we look also at the other 50% of the fish, and we follow the principle from nose to tail. So we not only take these two fillets from the fish, we also take the fish meat leftovers, and then we produce basically soups and toppings. And even with the fish bones, we cook them out and produce something called colatura, which is a good liquid umami kind of soya sauce replacement. And even then, with the organic leftovers that can't be used for the mankind feeding, we use these organic residual solid parts cut off from the fish in the insect farm. So basically, this is also, there is, I would say, a similarity, Tanya, what you say for the wastewater, on how we see the precious resource, which is the roundfish.
And I think
Tanya?
back to the Norwegian salmon farming industry, 100% of the salmon is being utilized. I think it's only the salmon blood at the moment that is not being utilized in terms of either human consumption products or other kind of highly valued nutritional products going either for human nutrition, the pharmaceutical market, or to high value proteins and oil products to the pet food or even the aqua feed market. So this is already a very well-established kind of technology and in the market. And I think this is definitely the way forward in terms of not seeing how you can build a system that is 100% reusing all different kinds of waste streams into new kinds of food production value chains.
Yeah, so we're slowly coming to the end of our talking part here. We have lots of questions we want to get to. Johannes, to round this off, to tell me two things. The first thing is, where are you right now in this vision of the RAS system? And what is your perfect outcome of this webinar here today? What are you looking for?
Yeah, so today, I mentioned earlier, we are currently serving up to 7,000 daily dishes in the canteen business. I think by end of this year, we more or less come up to doubling this figure, just very roughly. And this basically is just more or less doubling every year. So as soon as the first big farm is up and running and producing the regional produce, then we have basically all the offtake in the canteen. And currently, as we say, 7,000 daily dishes being consumed, up to 7,000 dishes. Secondly, we are right now, actually, we have ordered a first container-based fish production system. We call it the pilot farm, which we basically built within the Munich vicinity. And there we have basically a small mushroom module and a small greenhouse and a small fish farm. So basically there we can show and prove how it is actually to produce the food, process it locally, and sell it locally. So this is a pilot farm, and this is coming in a few weeks. Talking about the big farms, where do we stand there? So the first farm site has been purchased in the north of Bavaria, which is between Nuremberg and Stuttgart. So these are also the metropolitan areas to where we would then ship out this first farm's produce to further farm site in the south of Bavaria under very mature negotiations, and another organic garden farm site between Berlin and Leipzig, so the northeast of Germany, also is under mature negotiations. So this is where we currently stand.
Great. So what do you want to take away from our audience today?
Yeah.
What do you need?
So for the energy providers, we have so many big energy companies from Europe who want to partner with us. We have fantastic partners pre-selected for mushroom and for vegetables. We know exactly what kind of technology we want, what kind of energy consumption and stuff they need. So basically tick in the box for these three core elements. And for fish, there's not a tick in the box yet, because we do have to appreciate that the German fish module operators, they're fairly small compared to bigger ones from other European nations, and especially from outside of Europe. So we are very much interested also to get an exchange to up and running, big scale producing established operators from other countries who have an interest to expand their capacities in the German market. We would love to get an exchange with the tier one system developers, so the technology system providers, and then discuss with them which kind of technology is the right one for which of our sites. And thirdly, we do have a strong lineup of investors who want to invest in the German food market or in the German agricultural tech market. So we have a good investment opportunity there. But we also came to understand that there are certain fish industry focused investors. So if there are some fish investors now in the audience, please feel free to set up a meeting with us as well. And then we could basically connect their investment opportunity interest with what we have as organic garden. Those three things: fish operators, technology providers, investors.
Perfect. Thank you very much. To our audience, I can see that everybody who joined us at the beginning is still with us here, more or less. That's amazing. Thank you so much for listening, all these 45 minutes here. I posted 2 links in the chat. One of them is the fact sheet, where you can recheck what Johannes just told you, and you can book a call with him for that. So if you are on his list here, if you want to get in touch with Johannes, check out that document. You'll get a direct contact to him. The other one is the deck to Organic Garden in English, so you get the full picture if there's something you didn't catch. Also, we're recording this webinar, so don't worry, you can send this around. You can rewatch this on YouTube. And let's move into our Q&A. If you haven't asked your question, ask it now. We already have 13 questions up here, and I'll start with the first one. Sorry, from Kai Weten. He's asking, hi Johannes, super exciting topic. Are you thinking about using the insect protein as a feed additive in fish feed?
Yes, we do. I think I mentioned it. So we actually, funny thing, so we use an established technology. It's from a Bavarian insect module producer, and their system's up and running. So we basically have seen how they convert bioresidual waste into high proteins. It's used the black soldier fly, and when I say fly, we talk about the fly that is flying, but we specifically it's the worms or the larvae, and there's a fantastic bio waste conversion rate into insect protein. And depending on the fish, from the 100% fish feed, it makes sense to have a certain amount of this fish feed being covered by the insect protein. We have seen that these the larvae, living ones, actually fed to trout or salmon trout, and they just eat the live larvae. Where we would go a processing step ahead, and we are partnering with fish feed mills that take the insects, they produce together with other proteins and other nutritions the final fish feed. But so what we don't need anymore is we don't have to take the protein, the fish protein from the Chilean or West African coast and ship it thousands of kilometers to the German fish mill. So we eliminate this by having basically a local source of the insect protein, then being fed in final fish feed into the fish modules.
Thank you. I think that answered it quite in depth. Moving on to a slightly more critical, or pointing to a very obvious fact here, internally from my very own senior editor, Rob Fletcher. Are you not concerned, he's asking, by the fact that very few, if any, RAS facilities are profitable? I think, Tanya, there's a lot you could add to this.
Yeah, maybe just to I think definitely, yes, I think the challenge that we definitely have seen with a lot of these kinds of very complex, big land-based recirculated aquaculture systems is the scale of it, right? I think for many of these projects, they definitely do tend to target like 10,000 ton type of a fish production, because those are usually the volumes that seems to be required in order to make the business case or the financial model to be attractive in terms of investment into these kinds of projects. I think now, given what we have seen, I think there is a kind of an acknowledgement in the industry that it definitely will take maybe more kind of a time and effort to reach that kind of scalability of these kinds of new farming systems. But I think this is where organic garden has done it more from a different kind of approach, that it's not targeting 10,000 tons kind of a fish production system. It's more about downsizing it to a scale that actually will make it more feasible. So I think that is, for me, also something that I find to be both refreshing and also interesting in terms of trying to see how can we actually make a business case that can actually be attractive for investors at a different kind of a scale, because it requires such a different kind of investment. It's a different kind of a capex. It's a different kind of a complexity in terms of these large scale systems. I definitely truly believe that those large systems, they do have a future. We need to also see how we can ramp up our aquaculture production. But I think definitely it's also interesting to see other types of concepts that are maybe not that dependent on these kinds of volumes and can still make a feasible kind of a business case out of it.
Johannes, anything to add?
So when we started with the organic garden concept a few years ago, we experienced two learnings. The first learning is a lot of the fish farms, especially RAS systems, the smaller ones, they're just too small in scale, and they didn't have an offtake. So they didn't really know where to ship the produce in the end. And they couldn't really promote it because they didn't come from the marketing communication side of how good and solid produce is. When we go to the canteens, on an average dish, I mean, you can have a 100% vegetable dish, of course, at organic garden, but if you would like to have an animal topping, we do prefer fish over beef. And if you have fish, you only need about 80 grams. And then for the canteen business that you're addressing, it doesn't really make such a big difference if you ask for €6.50 or €6.20. If you convert this to the kilogram, we would actually be in a position to offer the fish farm producer above market prices for the good produce, because we can go into the communication, into the marketing, and say it comes from the region, it comes from a synergetic cycle. The fish is raised in a very healthy way. It's a reduced CO2 production input needed. So there are a lot of, I would say, USPs, selling points, which if you sell something to a wholesaler, they just get lost. So having this direct to the consumer access gives you a chance to promote all the USPs and to actually raise a bit above market prices per kilogram. And the second thing that we learned is you need a good professional partner, a real expert handling the machines. So a lot of, I would say, young companies that have done their own operations of RAS systems, they didn't really know how to handle the technology. They didn't really know too much about fish, and fish is a super sensitive topic. It's quite critical. So this is why we need a very strong, very experienced partner. And then we're quite sure that this will become a highly profitable case for everybody.
Perfect. Thank you. The next upvoted question is again from Rob. What sort of companies are you looking to partner with in terms of the RAS side of the operation? What sort of feedback have you had from these companies to date?
Yeah, so we start usually going to the operators. So to give you an example, Rob, with the mushroom, we checked who are the biggest mushroom producers in Germany. We spoke to the biggest ones, and now we have the biggest organic mushroom producing company partnering with us at the site. And they bring their own technology. They showed us the technology. It functions perfectly with our cycle, so everything there is easy. So we basically came from approaching the operators. When we've done the similar thing for the fish industry or for the fish modules, we started going to the biggest German fish producers, and they honestly are not so big compared to the Danish or Finnish or Norwegian ones. And this is why a few weeks ago, we actually addressed Moritz and said, hey, Moritz, you with the fish side and together with Hedge, could you please, because you know exactly who from the international audience would be the right counterparts who are big enough to partner, would be the right suitable partner. So Rob, so far, I think this is for us the kickoff to find the right, strong enough and experienced enough partner.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question is from Thomas Belkeman Patterson. Thomas, I took out two of your comments here because they weren't phrased as a question. excuse that. So we're getting to the third one here. Thomas is asking, am I correct that you are looking for those companies that are already doing part of this circular system?
Yeah, so for each and every single of these modules, they all will be operated by established existing segment experts. So the greenhouse that we have here would be operated by one of the top 3 greenhouse operators in Germany. The same is true for the mushroom. The same is true for the insect. So we as Organic Garden, we're not operating any of those. It's just that for the fish, we don't have very strong established partners. So this is why we're actually having this exchange with you guys in the audience. If I understood the question correctly.
That's how I understood it. Yes, I think that is just perfect. Next question, Johannes Fuchs is asking, what ratios of production are you looking to achieve? What production in RAS are you trying to achieve compared to the size of your greenhouses?
Okay, so we try to feed, so it comes basically from this regional area where we have about 3 to 5 million people living in cities within this area. And then we try to have each farm together with its regional partners producing up to around 30 to 40,000 dishes daily for the canteens in this area. And if you convert this into the amount of vegetables and mushroom you need and fish you need, very roughly we need, for this canteen-driven market, we need about 4,000 tons of vegetables per year. We need around between 500 tons and 1,000 tons of mushroom per year for this region. It's quite a variance because mushroom has super big growth rates, and we don't only think about the mushroom as the full mushroom, but we think about it also in processed ways, even up to as a meat replacement product. So we've experimented with the king oyster and shiitake mushroom. We came up basically with a burger patty that tastes more or less similar. So it's not only the pure mushroom, but it's really going into the meat replacement business, really thinking about the proteins and how you can use them best for the final dish. So this is why we have between 500 up to 1,000, quite a variance. And for the fish, we're aiming for a minimum of 500 tons. We think we could actually sell up to 1,000 ton annual production per site. Now, for the mushroom, we have somebody who says, okay, love the concept, we're joining there, we produce everything that you need between 500 and 1,000 tons, but we as mushroom experts, if we join your organic garden farm, we would like to produce up to 2,000 tons. Could you give us the energy and the space? Yes, we can. And then he takes basically half of the production and he ships it to other regions of Germany, or he exports them, because the operational costs are just so low in this construction sites that his economic efficiency point is at 2,000 tons. This is also, I would say, suitable for the fish interested operator. Organic Garden would like to obtain between 500 to 1,000 tons of ground fish per year per site. If somebody comes and says we would like to have 1,200 or 1,500 or even 2,000 tons, depending on the water availability and depending on the space requirement, we're very open to discuss also this.
Perfect.
I would like maybe just to talk a little bit in terms of the space requirements. I know that was also one of the questions to the chat as well. I think one thing definitely, there is a growing demand when it comes to sustainable kind of proteins. I mean, at the moment, there's actually a higher demand for farm seafood than we actually are able to supply. And this is also some of the concerns, right? Because we're definitely seeing also quite high prices for a lot of the farm seafood because the demand is higher than the current supply situation. But I think something that we definitely have seen with these large, kind of more complex kind of food system is also in terms of the growing concerns from some local communities. And I think this is also, I think, a really important part in terms of how do we as food producers, part of the food community, also communicate in terms of the consumers, in terms of this transition. So I think there's a huge kind of educational component. I think there's a huge kind of transparency that also needs to be included in these kinds of projects in terms of how are we actually producing food, and also to set up the right kind of discussion arenas and forums, and also to be able to communicate very transparently to consumers in terms of how these kinds of new systems actually work, what is the carbon footprint of it, what are the input factors, and so on.
Thomas has actually sent a slight correction to his former question about the system modules. What he was trying to ask was, are you interested in talking to companies that already have multiple of the modules working together?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So please, Thomas, there is the link with my Calendly invite. hit me with a time slot suitable for you, and I would love to exchange with you.
Perfect. Again, for everybody, the link is in the fact sheet, in the link in the chat. So next question. We already only have 10 minutes here left on the Q&A. Honestly, we still have about 10 questions to get through. Will the whole fish life cycle be on site? How will you manage the hatchery and broodstock? Obviously, salmon and trout are easily available in pre-grow out form, but what about pike perch? To summarize, what is the plan for the intake and harvest size of each? I can sense there's also a species question in here.
Yeah. So I give a first answer as a layman. Tanya, please support me with some other insights about the hatchery element of this. So we come from the final food dish. So I'm not the professional guy about the hatchery. We do know that pike perch, for instance, has a very limited number of suppliers, basically from the, in Germany we call it Setzlinge, so from the small fish that is then matured. So there it would kind of make sense economically and also on risk reduction mitigation terms to have your own pike perch hatchery. So if you would go for pike perch, if there's an operator saying, I love organic garden, I want pike perch, I need my hatchery, we would understand this and we would accommodate for this. On the other hand, for trout, salmon trout, and also for salmon, well, Moritz and Tanya, you know, the market is just huge and big and mature. There are enough suppliers who could provide basically the small fish, which we would then only mature. So I think it depends a bit basically on this specimen that we actually grow.
You're completely right, Johannes. It depends definitely on the species, but we definitely are seeing that for these more onshore or land-based systems, they have a very integrated kind of a value chain approach in it. So everything from the hatchery to the nursery, all the way up to the harvesting, and also in terms of very advanced secondary processing of the fish, as you mentioned, Johannes, also making sure of full utilization in terms of the offcuts and the byproducts. So in a very kind of a dense kind of a spatial area, you can actually have the entire value chain in a very closed, controlled environment. Perfect.
Let me move on to the next question here. Keen to get through all of them. Jochen Grammer asks, hi Johannes, great concept. Why do you focus on large customers? How does your company acquire so many plots with building permits?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Jochen. So well, we are a young company. So at the beginning, honestly, we also thought more about the B2C market, the direct end consumer market. But then we just saw it's just easier to scale and to grow our business in the B2B canteen business. If one guy, more or less, you have to convince, and then all of a sudden you have 1,000 consumers there. Plus these consumers, they come every single day inside. And this will now go a bit too much into depth. We have a software solution for the canteen operator with its own unique selling points. And this allows us to have this big, I mentioned it before, German button where we can say, and today we have fish meals on all the canteen dishes in Germany. So it's just easier to steer the offtake from the farm produce directly on the dishes if you have this basically focused customer. And yeah, for why we get so many very good properties offered, I think it's driven that we integrate the existing regional partners. The regional farmers, they see us as an additional sales channel. They don't see us as a competition. They see us as a sales channel where we take their produce together to the companies, to the canteens. Plus they see this organic garden farm using all these nutritional side streams, also producing a very good, this is not about food anymore, but this is like a byproduct, the soil plant where we produce a high nutritional earth, the soil for the farmers, so that they love this. They also see the chance that we have excess water in dry seasons, which you could give up to them, and so on and so forth. So there's so many positive aspects for the farmers, and they're usually in these kind of areas, the voters for the mayors, that we have such political strong support, and this is why we get so many sites and good construction permits. Yeah, thanks for the question.
And every farmer obviously loves an offtake agreement. So that is a great prerequisite from you guys. Next question from Elisabeth Henriksson. Have you performed a life cycle assessment on the system as a whole, or would this be interesting to collaborate on?
So a life cycle cost assessment we have done. So we spoke with really established German experts who know about fish consultancy and RAS systems, and we've done all the life cycle cost assessments with them. But this was based on pike perch. So I guess looking into different species and different sizes of annual output and different RAS technologies. Now we came to understand that different, I would say, technology mature and capex intense variations of RAS systems. We have life cycle cost assessments for one setup. So they're different when available.
Sorry to interrupt you, Johannes. I think this is more about CO2 impact or general environmental impact assessment.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So if it's about the CO2 impact, we're not fully through, but we can say by having the CO2 neutral production of energy, by having the reduction of the transportation waste, and by basically serving dishes in the canteens that have on average 85% of vegetables, we aim to reduce the CO2 footprint of each and every single dish by minimum 50%. So this is the ambition where we're going. And in the first canteens, we are on a very good and positive track on this. And we actually have smart data where we can tell the canteen operator how much CO2 he already has reduced by feeding several thousands organic garden dishes so far.
I think definitely what we have seen in terms of our carbon footprint assessments, it's where you definitely, as I mentioned earlier, there's two major challenges in terms of the aquaculture farming production. One is transportation. That definitely has a huge impact in terms of the carbon emission of the aquaculture value chain. And the second one is definitely also in terms of the aquaculture feed and ingredients. So I think addressing those two topics would definitely tremendously also take down in terms of the carbon emission. And then, as we have also discussed in terms of the energy sources, to be also depending on green energy sources also takes the carbon emissions significantly to extreme low values as well.
We have 4 questions, 4 minutes. So Bryce Kozak asks, how will you deal with the relatively higher costs of real estate closer to urban areas for agriculture and aquaculture, which uses a lot of space? There's also the issue of the public not wanting these operations in their backyard.
Yeah, so we are not basically building where the metro station is. So you can assume we are about, I'd say, from Munich, about 30 to 50 kilometers away. So there the costs really drop again. So we look basically where the cost per square meter is dropping really, and then you acquire basically for agricultural square meter prices. So this is quite affordable. And based on agricultural acquisition cost, we then in the end have the opportunity to have basically food industry because we get the permits. The second part of his question, please, was what?
It was, one second. The not in my backyard approach that people don't want.
Totally true. We have observed that there's some mayors or politicians who push a certain land to us, and then we basically check with the neighbors, and there are some neighbors where we see, oh, there would be quite a lot of resistance, and they just actually leave these kind of sites by themselves. So we need good sites, good political support, including, I would say, neighbor support.
Okay. 2 more questions here. What is the rate of losses caused by diseases or emergencies of fish and plants that you estimate to occur and include in your economic forecast as expenses or insurance costs? I'm gonna stop us there. George, I think this question is very, very complex. Feel maybe free to send an email with that. If Johannes has the time, he'll look into this. But I think we don't have the time to answer this. One very last relevant question here from Xena again. What is your stand with permitting? What is your timeline with permitting? Are you ready to go or still permits to do?
So we are planning the final permits end of this year, and we would love to secure the final partner for the first site also, let's say, in the next couple of months. Basically, we reflect this in the first half of 2024, when we have basically the Southern Bavarian site. So we could go with one fish operating partner going for the North Bavaria and South Bavaria, but we're also totally open if there would be like 2 different fish operating interested parties.
Perfect. One final question here about, are you hiring for these projects?
Absolutely. Hit us with your CV. It's a fantastic project. We have a lot of, I would say, people working for Organic Garden, already 200 people, strong and growing. And most of them, they just fully love our vision, kicking it every day to make this vision become reality. And yeah, please forward us your CVs. Perfect.
We are already coming. We're just over time here. I know our speakers here really want to say goodbye. Tanya, I'll give you the last few words before Johannes closes us down.
No, first of all, I just want to say congratulations to Organic Garden. I think it really is both interesting and refreshing to see a new new innovation food platform in terms of how we can produce food. And I think this is a good example in terms of how we can rethink in terms of the ways that we are producing food. And also I love the integration between the blue and the green food value chain. So best of luck with your project moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you, Tanya. Johannes, tell us one more time, one sentence. Who do you want to get in touch with you?
It's a great vision, but it's not dreaming. It's proven. It's a proven system with all the modules. We just bring it together. So thanks, Tanya, basically for summarizing perfectly. I couldn't do it better. So we have the perfect partner for mushroom, for vegetables, and now one of you should be the perfect partner for the fish business, operating it. But please also, if you're a system operator, or sorry, system developer, drop me a note, propose your RAS system that you think is suitable for the German fish market. And if you're interested in investing into the fish opportunity market of Germany, please also schedule one of the Calendly meetings. Apart from this, thank you so much to the total audience. I think it's not usual that for all webinars, everybody who has started in the first minute stays so long until the end. I think also Moritz having so many questions from so many different backgrounds shows that we actually have a quite interesting topic for so many different people. So thank you so much for your interest. And thanks, Moritz, for organizing all of this. Job well done. Thank you, Moritz.
Thank you all. Nothing to add. Have a great day. Thank you for attending. This will be available as a recording. So come to the Fish Side YouTube and to the Organic Garden YouTube, and you'll find it all there. The links are in the chat. Copy them out. I wish you all a fantastic afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.